Good afternoon all. Thank you for making the time to join us on this webinar. We certainly are fortunate and humbled to have our existing clients, potential clients, friends of Lightstone and members of the media. Introducing our speakers for today are Phoebe and Lindsay from What 3 Words. Lindsay.
Good morning everyone, my name is Lindsay. I'm the Country Manager South Africa for What 3 Words based full-time in Johannesburg. Phoebe?
Thanks, Lindsay. Hi, everyone. Very nice to have you all online today. As Lindsay mentioned, I work very closely with our logistics and e-commerce partners in South Africa. As you might have guessed by my accent, I'm actually based in London today, as is also indicated by the What 3 Words address below my profile. Thanks, Pat.
Okay, and in South Africa, Roger and myself. Roger.
Thanks, Pat. Yeah, from London to Cape Town. So we're all over the show today. I'm based in the Western Cape in the Winelands. I thought because I'm beyond the Boerewors curtain, I'd use the Afrikaans 3 words address. So thanks so much for everybody for joining and look forward to engaging with you over the next few minutes.
Great, thank you, Roger. And myself, Patrick. You see my What 3 Words is blame taxi ambition. Certainly in Johannesburg, we blame taxis for a lot of the things. To kick us off, I'd like just to, post some thoughts through to you, and 3 central thoughts that are aligned to location and address. Point number 1, we look at an increase in e-commerce activity, and what's pertinent here is that we've seen that buyer behavior has changed over. If you look at the last 12 months, where traditionally you were seeing e-com was traditionally found in your urban suburbs. What you find now is that your consumers are either in the States, townships, or plots. The interesting fact around that is that in the States, a township and a plot will have the addresses consumed in a different way within your estate. So if you look at a Denford estate where there could be 100 houses, there you'll see your consumer will put in the address for their house as opposed to the estate. In the township, you will have an address, or you may just have a stand number. With certain of your plots, it will just be a plot number. So whether you are a delivery truck or whether you are trying to get to visit a friend and put it into a GPS, you may find some interesting things that come about from an address perspective. Certainly another point for consideration is your instant customer gratification. So if you look at the housing markets now, certain of your buyers are drawn to areas where it's fiber ready. Fiber ready areas are dependent on location and address. And we're certainly seeing that as more of your consumers move into your more non-traditional areas. I've used the example of plots. Your fiber companies are checking to see the feasibilities of actually getting out to those locations, which then further looks at certain of your apps, whether it's your Zulzi app or your Checker 660 app, where it's order today and deliver today. For that to happen, the location and the address has to be understood prior to those products actually leaving the shops where they are being shipped from. Point number 3 to think about is your route to market enhancements. Certainly you've seen that the term of drop shipping or your younger consumers have been driven by social media. What all that is showing us is your mobile devices, as an example, have now become a central GPS indicator in our daily lives. And again, based on location and address. Taking it back to an estate, a township, or a plot, we then see that the buyer's market is certainly more dependent on speed to market, the accuracy of the address, and also the full understanding of, are you in an estate, a township, or a plot? This shift of online, in this post-pandemic world, will certainly be one that's heavily reliant from a location and a correct address. With that, we take it through to Roger.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Pat. Yeah, so I think in order to start, what I'd first like to do is just get an idea in terms of the online environment and just to run a quick poll to understand, from a attendee perspective, if you've actually had any issues around addressing or online addressing or delivery of packages. So the first question, and I'm going to just launch a yes/no question on the poll. If you have ever had an online delivery delayed due to address issues. All right, so let's share that one. Interesting. 71% of all the responses say yes, we have had an online delivery delay due to addressing issues. The next question I have, so how often does the delivery driver phone you for directions when dropping off a package or order at your home or office. Thanks so much everyone for your participation. What we've seen now from this online poll that we've done is it's a sometimes question. So not always, not never, but sort of in the middle. So we're finding that is coming through sometimes. And what we've found is pretty similar results than in the environments and markets that we work. From our side, there's a recent article that's just been released yesterday, actually, by a company called Worldwide Works. The MD, Mr. Arthur Goldstruck, he did a lot of research recently into the e-commerce market, and he's seen that there's been about a 66% growth in e-commerce in South Africa over the last year. And we all know that services like online shopping, food delivery, medical accessibility, and the like are becoming more digitized. And I think also due to the impact of COVID-19, which has really hastened this scenario. And it really now is around operational effectiveness, customer engagement, or essentially out innovating your competition in the sector. And businesses really need to use accurate geospatial or geolocation facilities to ensure the sort of route to market and ensuring that that no money is wasted. And what we found, well, actually what 3 Words has found through some of their research recently, is that 27% of consumers have had problems entering address details when shopping online. About 19% of failed deliveries are due to inaccurate delivery address details, and 62% of online shoppers have experienced a late or failed delivery in the last year. So these statistics are actually pretty well aligned to what we've just experienced now in our online survey. And so we're seeing these sort of trends play out in the market, which are obviously not ideal in terms of the actual addressing world that we find ourselves in. So I'd like to just share a few interesting stories that I've come across. A groom recently in Indonesia, we actually ended up the wrong address. I really hope that the groom was able to find his bride closer to where she was, and it's normally so much for the bride being late, but in this case it was the groom. But I think a little closer to home, we see the South African Post Box still struggling with delivery, and this article was published last month around the Post Box still, or the Post Office still delivering to the wrong addresses. So we're seeing these addressing issues play out in our South African context. And what I mean by the context in South Africa, it's really one of complexity. And on the right-hand side, we see this sort of stark contrast and the reality of inequality in South Africa. We have a few meters, yet worlds apart. On the left-hand side, though, we have an article by the GCRO and the University of Pretoria. This was also published recently, in which academics are proposing that South Africa needs a national address, a national database of addresses, or a single source of the truth, where there's a significant sort of divide, I think, in South Africa when it comes to address and accurate address services. So on the formal sector side, where you're seeing these lovely houses and built-up estates, and businesses are relatively well indexed in terms of addressing, we can easily engage with businesses for online shopping deliveries and telecommunications services and installations and medical deliveries and all sorts of things. However, in stark contrast, the informal sector is really poorly indexed, which is complicating access to all forms of service delivery in these areas that really just sort of house actually a significant percentage of the South African population. And so an address for a person living in an informal dwelling or a formal dwelling has a different meaning. The formal address is governed essentially by the South African Post Office as custodian coordinating the address services in South Africa. But we all know that municipalities and provinces also have their own databases, and unfortunately all of these are pretty siloed. Whereas in the informal environment, it's very unstructured. Residents typically use verbal descriptions to explain where they live. So an example, if you look at this picture on the right-hand side, you'd find somebody explaining, you take the dirt road after the Shabin, 2 houses down on the left, that's sort of where I live. And so how do you, in this environment in South Africa, as somebody or an organization delivering services, ensure accuracy around delivery? And so that's where through our partnership with What 3 Words, we aim to bridge this divide and support businesses with more customer-centric delivery solutions to any property in South Africa. And we'll share a little bit more about this in the coming slides. And so where this all leads to, and I'd just first like to talk a little bit about sort of the location intelligence as I call it sort of the interconnector of systems and geography as the common denominator. So whether you're delivering a meal to a customer, installing a fiber connection, or administering even a sort of a COVID-19 vaccine, location matters. And a customer either needs to know how to get to you if you're a brick and mortar store, or you need to know how you get your product or service to a customer as fast and as effectively as possible. And so location intelligence is the interconnector and allows for geospatial information to flow between people, place, and platform. And that's sort of what we're doing as Lightstone and through our partnership with What 3 Words. And the framework around geospatial intelligence, so the underlying GIS is where we build a lot of this intelligence into our systems. And I'd like to share firstly how we've developed our own internal framework. We call this a spatial data framework. It's our internal GIS really, where we manage the store and the flow of geospatial data sets across our organization and also partner ecosystems. And we have a team of dedicated GIS specialists who collate data of which come from many sources, as I mentioned earlier, towns, municipalities, provinces, and ensure that our physical address database is made up and used and is really up to date and conforms to the South African national addressing standard. So here you can see a base of cadastre building up to a national address dictionary. And then on top of that, spatial entities such as gated communities, business parks, retail, landscape, anything that you can think of, points, specific points of interest, suburbs, towns, and so the sort of pyramid is built up, and we use this across our various applications within the business to ensure that we are sourcing and we are managing our data from a sort of single source of the truth. And just showing how this actually works is an application that we recently developed and launched into market, which is our Lightstone Search application. And later in the presentation, we'll show you how this is integrating with What 3 Words as well. So by harnessing the location intelligence and systems across the Lightstone group that I just spoke about, and the robust spatial data framework, we've been able to develop an address search application allowing a flexible and user-friendly experience. This is really sort of the back-end side of it, but it enables you various functionalities, the one being autocomplete functionality. I've used one church as an example. I could put one Kerk street if it was in Afrikaans, and it would pick up that it's Kerk and church are the same thing. One is Afrikaans, one's English, and provide you those different options throughout any address in South Africa, or any town or suburb. On the right-hand side, we've got an example of C view, which is a sectional scheme, and there are plenty of C views, or any address with a name C view. We'll be able to then filter those and identify the correct property for that specific address. Further to that, being able to drill down a step deeper to that is leveraging the property data sets within Lightstone to enable further enrichment of customer data, as well as additional services such as geocoding and address validation. Here's just an example of searching for Durbanville. So you get Durbanville Industrial, Central, Hills, Outlying, and then one could even drill even deeper if you have a specific title deed number that you are searching for. So there's various ways and means of being able to search for an address, but again, all of it is based on our spatial data framework. And then finally, another view I'd like to share is one which is more map-centric. And this allows a user to be able to experience and use map-centric functionality, where they can enable their location-based services on their mobile device or on a desktop device, and pinpoint their GPS location on a map. And this then can be reverse geocoded back to a physical address, and then we can also enrich that with other alternative data that we have within Lightstone. And these can all be built into a backend of a an e-commerce provider, a dashboard or CRM system within a telecommunications company, or whatever the use case may be around ensuring that addresses are captured correctly at source, so that you don't have to do address cleaning and verification processes, and ensuring that sort of single source of the truth is always accurate and correct. So that's a little bit about Lightstone and what we've done from a technology perspective and the digital addressing side. Before I handing over to Phoebe from What 3 Words, I'd just like to do one more poll. If we're navigating with a GPS or mapping service, have you ever ended up at the wrong address or entry location? Thanks so much. And interesting. So similar results. I'd like to just share that with you. So 75% of all respondees say, yep, we have ended up at the wrong address or entry location when using a GPS or mapping service. And at this point, I'd like to just hand over to Phoebe to take us through What 3 Words.
Thanks, Roger. That's quite the segue. So off the back of that, I'm going to be going into a bit more detail into What 3 Words, the addressing system. But first, kind of touching upon kind of why we came about before then diving into the new integration that Roger was mentioning about how What 3 Words is now partnering with Lightstone. So Roger has already kind of touched upon this, that existing addressing systems aren't always great and aren't really good enough, especially within kind of the e-commerce and logistics sphere. This is a global problem. This is something we've seen all over the world, but obviously today I will focus on some of the issues we've seen more specifically within the South African market. So here is a screenshot that is just outside Durban, looking at it on sort of the normal standard Google Maps view. You can see there's a road up the left-hand side. You can see there's a couple of property plots. That all looks great. If you were going to get a delivery, you could, say that I was off Kennedy Road. However, if you actually switch to satellite view, you can then see that there are thousands of people who actually live here, who have no way of communicating exactly where their home is beyond the Kennedy Road up here in the left-hand side. And that's just not very good, really good enough if you're looking to get a delivery from an e-commerce store, but also if you're looking for sort of any kind of standard service that we think is sort of human rights to have, whether you're looking to register for a bank card, for even get an ambulance come to you, or even register to vote. Anyone living here wouldn't have a way of communicating exactly where they are. And kind of in one sense, it's quite frustrating, but actually it's also very fundamental to be kind of recognized by society, is to be able to communicate where you are. You'll be sort of reduced, as Roger said, kind of using verbal descriptions, and really sort of impacts the service offering if you are living in this particular location. But it's not just informal settlements like the previous slide. It's also sort of townships. This is Mabopane, and you can see here that on this screen, this road where this pin has been dropped doesn't appear to have a name. But the government has named this road. It has a name. If you live on this road, you know that you live on Masatsanagape Crescent, but it doesn't seem to show up on Google. They've missed it. What does this mean if you're trying to get a parcel delivered to you? Whether it's a pizza, some shoes, a bank card. How are you going to describe that if you can't even see it appearing on Google Maps? And also on sort of larger, these housing estates that Pat mentioned earlier, kind of that are springing up at an incredible rate on the outsides of sort of Joburg and Cape Town. These beautiful 4-bedroom houses, you got one in the top right there with a swimming pool. But they're having the same issues. These roads likely have a name if you're down and living on that street, but it's coming up on Google as an unnamed road. How are you meant to communicate for your delivery, for that Zulzi, within an hour delivery promise? How are you meant to communicate exactly where you are? And actually, if you do type in the address here, so 234 Waterfall Hills Lane, it actually drops you down here at the bottom. And if you're unfamiliar with this particular area, you think, great, must be just the entrance to the housing estate. However, the entrance is actually all the way at the other end up the top here. If you're a delivery driver, that's a lot of crucial time that's being wasted through sort of inadequate addressing, sort of the the data that's around, just not really identifying the exact place that you need. And that's really frustrating for the delivery driver, but also for the customer, for that customer experience. You guys have already filled out that poll and said that, you know, you have had those issues. You do have to phone the delivery driver, and it is frustrating when you think you're getting a really good service. And even when you do have an address, there is often repeated street names. Again, this is something we've seen all over the world. Where I am based today in London, Church Road seems to be a particular favourite of governments to have named roads. I think there are 16 alone in London, and that's not even taking into account for any of the other cities in the country. In Mexico City, there are over 600 Juarez streets. And that's really confusing. Here you can see this is Juba Street. This is one that we've seen in South Africa, but also Pretoria Street's also one that's a lot of duplicate names of it. These repeated street names can actually be really easy to make a mistake, because we've seen that consumers and customers often don't differentiate between kind of minor variations. So Juba Crescent versus Juba Street versus Juba Road. And so if they're inputting, you know, Juba Road, but they live on Juba Street, they often don't identify that differentiation between the two. And this is particularly problematic when you are a delivery driver or an e-commerce platform. And some research has actually completely sort of verified this. 4 in every 5 retailers, that's 80%, that's a significant chunk, say that customers often don't realize that the failed deliveries are due to, in fact, to the fact they mistyped their own address. I have done this myself also. It is very easy to do with a traditional street address, just, you know, 1 letter wrong or something like that. 2/3, 66%, say the accuracy of address details is critical to their business. And I'm sure this is something that a lot of people on the call today will probably agree with. Being able to deliver to an accurate address is incredibly important for your sort of customer offering. And that's where What Three Words comes in. So we saw these issues and we thought, instead of just, you know, keeping calm and carrying on, there must be something better out there that could be used. So what we've done is we've divided the entire Earth's surface into 3-meter squares and given each one a unique 3-word reference. So anywhere in the world now has an address using just 3 words. So I could actually meet Roger for a hike, and I could say, you know, instead of previously saying, you know, turn around anti-clockwise to the bush and there's another large bush and I'm at the top of the trail. Instead of doing that, I could say, hi Roger, can you meet me at Poet Standouts Masters? And he could easily find me at that exact 3-meter by 3-meter square. But in the context of kind of logistics and deliveries, that also means that a customer can provide the exact 3-meter by 3-meter square for their front door, or their front gate, or even the gate to the housing estate, to make it really, really easy for a delivery driver to find them quickly and simply. What we've done is we've taken something that's not particularly human friendly, but very, very precise. So a GPS coordinate. I think this slide really demonstrates how unhuman friendly they are. I'm not sure about you, but I definitely can't remember a 16-digit GPS coordinate. So we've taken that and we've converted it into 3 words and back again. And that's it. Really, really simple. Creating something that you wouldn't be able to use on an e-commerce checkout page, like a GPS coordinate, and you would be able to use it into towers sensors really easily. And we're available in over 47 languages. I believe it's 48 as of last week. This is really important to us because we believe that everyone should be able to talk about everywhere in their native tongue. So we're available actually in English, as you might have seen some of the slides previously, but also in Afrikaans, Zulu, and I apologize, I'm probably going to butcher this, but Xhosa. Again, sorry for butchering it. I've been trying to learn it for the last year, but here we go. And what that means is that you can communicate anywhere you are in the world in any of those languages. Again, I said that's something that's really, really important to us. So how do you use it? If you're a customer or anyone, you can discover your What Three Words address using our free What Three Words app and desktop map site. So using these services, you can discover, search, share, navigate, and even save a What Three Words address. And also the app works offline. So that means no matter where you are, you can always discover your current What Three Words address. And we work with thousands of businesses. So whether it's you've got a new Mercedes-Benz, as if I need another excuse to want one, probably one of our more luxe partnerships, you can actually get into a Mercedes-Benz and say, hey Mercedes, take me to, so where I am today, Filled Count Soap. and it will take you to that exact 3 meter by 3 meter square. But it's also used by sort of emergency services all over the world. So in the UK, Australia, the US, and even South Africa, to help respond to emergencies really quickly and easily, to be able to find those incidents really quickly, and also in logistics and e-commerce. So you can see here RTT, DPD Laser, and Hermes, which is a logistics provider in the UK, and that's because using a what three words address does result in some serious logistics efficiencies sort of across the globe. And we know this because we've done trials around the world. In the UAE, which has some also some questionable addressing infrastructure, and we saw that using a what three words address for deliveries was 42% faster than street addresses. And it's really interesting, kind of, you can see at the bottom there, it says using what three words resulted in 0 phone calls made, whereas using traditional street addresses, there were 25 phone calls made. So, you know, all of you guys who sometimes often get called by a delivery driver, using a what three words address really reduces that number of times you have to contact a customer, because the driver knows exactly where they're going. And sort of to contrast, we also did that trial in the United Kingdom, somewhere where, you know, people traditionally would assume that it's got pretty good addresses, but you can actually see that we still saw 30% faster deliveries using a what three words address versus a traditional street address. And bringing that back to South Africa, we actually trialed this in Sandton CBD, so not even somewhere that's, you know, really rural. This is, you know, a place with lots of office buildings, and we saw a 44% faster deliveries using what three words address. This was using a route optimization. However, we still saw 35% efficiencies when we were using just the what three words address without route optimization. And this just really shows that we're consistently more efficient around the world. So coming back to that Mabopane example that I showed earlier, what's really amazing using what three words is that someone who might have previously lived on Mosetsana Gape Crescent had no way of kind of communicating that on checkout. That, you know, it is addressed by the government, but often won't come up in systems. So what they can now do is go onto the what three words map site, find their exact front door. So this is Breeze's Crowds Party. That's the exact 3 meter by 3 meter square for their front door. I wonder if they ever have nice parties. That's quite a good three word address to have. And they can now input that what three words address into a checkout page. As I said, you know, a lot of leading businesses are now using what three words on their checkout pages, and you can see here this is Discam. So they've added an optional what three words field to their checkout. So if you are someone who's had issues with their deliveries before, by the looks of things, it's you know, 3/4 of people from this call. So that means that they can input the what three words address at checkout alongside their traditional street address, and that's going to be a really useful piece of information for the customer to use. You can see here there's also a nice little tooltip which explains what three words to the customer. They can also go and find the what three words address if they haven't already. As I said, the field is optional. It is an additional piece of information which is really useful to have, but not everyone's going to need it. Some people are blessed with lovely addressing and don't have any you know, any issues, and that's absolutely fine, which is why we do make sure that the field is optional. So I'm just going to pass over to Roger, who's going to walk through how we have now partnered with Lightstone to bring this technology to the Lightstone customers, and sort of how it works. Over to you, Roger.
Brilliant, thanks so much, Phoebe. So yeah, that's where we essentially have come together to bring the best of both worlds together through our Lightstone eShop application. And essentially what we've done, and I'd like to just show you 1 or 2 examples of how this practically plays out. So this is an example of, let's take that Mabopane example and walk through that one. So here we will go to the what three words application as an example. We'll include it Breeze's Crowds Party and copy that specific 3-word address over, and then move over to where we can see the actual location of that property. We can add the satellite imagery to actually look and see what it actually looks like in the environment there, in the area. And you can see there it's sort of a little bit more on the urban edge or on the rural side. with limited street information. We take that and we copy that into the Lightstone eShop application, and essentially what the functionality will provide you with are options around where that specific property is. It's in Mabopane, so we select that, and the application will autocomplete the actual requirement in terms of the actual the property, and you can select which of those properties are your property, and then have the additional capability of filling in more information. So if you have a specific house number that you're aware of, or your name. So you can see Lindsay is filling in her details there, and then you've got the option to check out at payment. So that's the one example of using the Lightstone application. This then can be built in to other use cases or business use cases at customers to offer a better, more efficient customer experience. And this is an example of a telecommunications provider which is using their 3-word address to autocomplete and fill in their online details using 3-word addresses. And here we take that same example. We type in the Breezes Crowds party Mabopane example there, and boom, it is auto completed, allowing for less clicks in an online environment and improved customer experience for the end user. So that's how practically we're bringing these two worlds together to enable the physical addressing side as well as the informal sector and everybody in between to have access to an address and ensure that deliveries are optimized and delivered in time. And so that brings us really to the end of the content that we would like to share with you today. So from us at Lightstone and from the What 3 Words team, thank you very much for your time today. It was wonderful engaging. And please reach out to us on email or send us a few questions online. And happy to take those and provide feedback and hopefully work with you going forward. Yeah, there's a question, Alistair, around the post office. Are there any thoughts on the post office? Will they consider using What 3 Words? Well, maybe they should. I think it's a good question, Alistair, and something that we should perhaps engage them on, because I think definitely something to take to them is the What 3 Words integration application.
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with postal services before. We've worked with kind of Mongol Post and a number of others. It's something we have done, and if it's something that they'd be interested in, we're always happy to help work out as a sort of another tool in the toolbox for them to have on hand for anyone who has addressing issues, definitely.
Then there's a few questions around costing models and license fees. So how we cost this typically is, there's various models around being able to serve up the number of addresses. So it's basically a volume based. My email is Roger, BROGERB @lightstone.co.za. So if you have any questions or if you'd like to get more information around the costing specifically, and we can run some scenarios for you and do some costing examples and estimates for you, I'd be happy to send that through to you. Anybody that's interested to use this application within their business and that requires specific costing for it. My email is Roger, BROGERB @lightstone.co.za. Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, everyone. Again, please reach out on email if you have any questions or any further requirements that you may have. And it was, again, wonderful engaging today. Thanks again for your participation with the polls. Keep safe and have a lovely rest of the week.